Hello guys, and welcome to this very special video that we're doing outside of our normal publishing schedule. No, this is not a video essay, all about the finances of Sex and the City. So for a lot of us, Sex and the City has been top of mind because it is now on Netflix. I myself am in the midst of a rewatch, and I would prefer not to disclose how many times I've already watched it at this point. But suffice to say, I'm a bit of a historian of the series. We've done some content here previously on the channel throughout the years about the finances of the show. And the biggest news is that our June podcast for our members is called $40,000 on Shoes. It is a 4-part series deep diving into the finances and career choices of our 4 leading ladies on Sex and the City. We already have published 1 episode and the rest will be published throughout the month. And so if you're a member, you can just find it in your member feeds. And if you are not, you can join here on YouTube or over at Patreon. Both are linked down below. You'll just need to join at the $9.99 tier to get access to our podcasts and all of the other things that we're publishing for our members. All of that being said though, in celebration of Sex and the City coming to Netflix, as well as our podcast, we wanted to do a special video breaking down 10 of the most deranged money moments from Sex and the City. Also, just an asterisk here that we will only be covering the original series. Both the movies and, God forbid, the new series do not count as canon in my opinion. They are of a different universe. And if Kim Cattrall had it in her to be like, actually, no thank you, so can I. All 4 of our ladies are represented here. Some more so than others, as are some of the male money moments. And we are just gonna go through and talk about them. They are in no particular order, although I would be very curious to hear your power rankings. And these choices just came from myself and our team here at TFD, but if you have another cringeworthy money moment from Sex and the City that you think should have gotten an honorable mention, please leave that in the comments as well. Our first money moment comes to us courtesy of one of the men on the show, and that is Aiden buying Carrie's apartment and also the apartment next door to it.
I figure I'm gonna need about half this space.
I figured you've got mentally ill.
So the entire genesis of the $40,000 on shoes comment, which we'll get into more later and is the title of our Sex and the City podcast.
I spent $40,000 on shoes and I have no place to live?
Is that Carrie is suddenly faced with having to buy her apartment on extremely short notice and has almost literally no money to her name to do so. And that leads her to follow a whole number of frankly deranged pathways to acquire that down payment. But I want to take a step back and explore what I think doesn't really get talked about enough when people talk about Carrie and the down payment, which is the fact that Aiden bought this apartment in the first place. At the time, for context, these 2 people had already been together once, broken up once because Carrie was having a protracted affair with her ex, gotten back together, and lest we forget, this man was forced to spend time in his upstate cabin with the man his girlfriend cheated on him with because she refused to honor his boundaries and keep him out of her life. In my opinion, an eminently reasonable request. Point being, at this point in the story, Aiden and Carrie are engaged for reasons that, in my opinion, basically amount to him attempting to control her and assuage his own fears that she won't cheat again, because he never truly forgave or got over the cheating in the first place. And honestly, why would he? She's still hanging out with him. Point being though, when Carrie's rent-controlled apartment goes co-op, perpetual simp Aiden Shaw's response is, don't worry, babe, I will buy your apartment and I will buy the apartment next door to it and knock down the walls between them and make us one big glorious apartment in which to be fundamentally incompatible. Now, spoiler alert, they do not get married because Carrie never had any intention of marrying that man in the first place. She wouldn't even wear the engagement ring on her finger. Also, this is a side note, but people often ask me, are you and your husband separated? Why are you never wearing rings? Here's the thing. I do wear rings on certain occasions. I'll wear them out if I'm dressed up or I'm going somewhere nice or, you know, it's that kind of a day. But in general, I have kind of a sensory ick with rings. I really don't like them. And also I don't like the way they feel. And also I have to take them off a lot to do things like dishes or cleaning or showering or sleeping or whatever. Point being, I don't wear my ring all the time. So in some ways, kind of no shade to Carrie for the fact that she didn't want to wear the ring on her finger, but I've been with my husband for over 13 years and I'm desperately in love with that man. Meanwhile, Carrie never liked Aiden that much to begin with and had a long-term affair on him. So I think the fact that she wasn't wearing her ring and would not move forward with setting a date or making any marriage plans should at least have been sign enough that you should not be buying this woman property. Anyway, I had to kick off the list with one of the messiest male money moves on this show. But let's swing back to the ladies here and touch on what I think is one of the more underrated bad money moves throughout the whole series. And that is Charlotte quitting her job the second she was married.
I'm thinking about quitting my job.
Did you get an offer from a better gallery?
No, I mean stopping working.
Now here's the thing, I actually like Trey. I think he got a pretty bad rap from a lot of the fans on the show. Because, they did have a rocky start, let's say. His relationship with his mother was odd. We could put up a picture of him in the bathtub with her. And ultimately, they didn't work out as a couple. Mostly because Trey did not want to keep trying to have a child at any cost, which, as one child-free queen to potentially another child-free king, I say work. But suffice it to say, Trey actually treated Charlotte extremely well, even in not being compatible, and even ended up giving her more than she was necessarily entitled to in the prenup, which I don't feel that she nearly negotiated strongly enough. But Charlotte did make one of the classic bad money moves that women who marry men earning more money than them are liable to make, which is immediately eliminating their own financial independence and earning potential and betting on the man to be their entire financial plan. And what's more wild about it is that she did this in service of being a full-time mother before she was even pregnant. She basically had such a narrow idea in her mind of what wife and motherhood was supposed to look like that she couldn't even wait to conceive a child before she quit her job in service of that future kid. Ultimately, she did land on her feet because her husband happened to be a gallant person. But arguably, she put herself in one of the most vulnerable money positions we saw any woman enter into on this show. Because as Samantha rightfully pointed out to her, the second she stepped away from that hyper-competitive and desirable role, there would be an endless line of 22-year-olds ready to do that job basically for free. But to pivot away from the characters making incredibly consequential legal and real estate decisions on behalf of questionable partners, let's just give a quick shout out at number 3 to Carrie referring to buying Vogue instead of dinner because it fed her more.
Sometimes I would buy Vogue instead of dinner. I just felt it fed me more.
Now, I don't really have much to say on this one because I think it really speaks for itself in terms of how horrendous it is. But I really do want to just highlight how much it is both a deranged thing to say from a financial perspective and also really typifies the chokehold that diet culture had on the late 90s, early 2000s in which this show was produced. Like the fact that Carrie was constantly borderline bragging about her inability to do even basic domestic tasks, the fact that she used her oven for shoe storage, the fact that she was always blasting cigs and chugging martinis but rarely eating. Basically, this quote is just that meme of like those two muscly man's hands like coming together, and one is diet culture and one is horrendous financial advice. Now we have to head back to the men here for a second to highlight one of my Roman empires from the show, which is the entire saga of Steve and the suit.
I invited you to this thing. I want to pay for the suit.
No way, you're not buying me a suit.
I dive into this heavy in the Miranda episode of our podcast because to me, I think Miranda is a very tragic figure, and the Greek mythology level tragedy of her life really boils down to settling for a broke boy like Steve. Now, here's the thing. The fact that Steve earned less than her or didn't have as prestigious of a job or education or background or any of that stuff, that doesn't matter. For example, Smith Jerrod is my favorite of all the men on the show, and he started not only earning way less than Samantha, also being a waiter where Steve was a bartender, he was also way younger than Samantha. So on every level, the power was in her favor, but he was amazing about it. Wasn't threatened by it, and it was a huge part of why he loved Samantha. Steve, on the other hand, was perpetually engaging in broke boy activities. For example, shaming Miranda that she needed to work to pay for the apartment he was living in instead of coming down to the playground to watch him shoot basketballs, pressuring her to get a dog, which he then didn't take care of, making her feel bad that she couldn't regularly stay up till 3 in the morning to sleep with him when he got off work because she had to go to work as an attorney in the morning. Essentially, their entire relationship was him sort of knocking her down a peg and making her feel defective as a woman because she happened to be career-driven and earn more than him. But no moment from the show really sums up the financial mess quite like Steve in the suit. If you don't remember, Miranda had a very big important party for her law firm, and she and Steve, who were in the early stages of dating, note that he wouldn't even let her pay for dinner and insisted to only going to places that he could afford, like dollar slice places. And he was going to be her plus one, but he had no appropriate outfit to wear to the party. He had a mustard yellow corduroy suit that would have been embarrassing for all parties. So Miranda, who earns more than him, insists on going to a high-end suit shop and getting him a custom-made suit, which he obviously cannot afford. There's an incredibly awkward moment where he attempts to split it between multiple cards, write a personal check, pay in cash, and he will not let Miranda pay for it, despite the fact that on the show, we constantly see men paying for things for women, and that's treated as both normal and aspirational. He's humiliated at the idea that a woman would buy him something, and rather than having that conversation openly, he chooses to stand her up on the night of her law firm dinner because he had to return the suit and he was never going to be able to fit into her fancy lawyer lifestyle. The takeaway in this show is that she should have just accepted him in his corduroy mustard suit and that she should feel bad for trying to buy him something. The fact that this was not the end of Miranda and Steve on so many levels is like the biggest crime of the show, but tune into our podcast to hear more about that. Next up, number 5 is the all-time classic, Carrie bullying Charlotte into pawning her engagement ring to provide a down payment for the apartment she can't afford.
Why didn't you offer me the money? I would have offered it to you.
Money and friendship don't mix.
This scene where Charlotte rightfully is like, it is not my job to fix your finances, is one in a long tradition of Sex and the City, wherein one of the other characters has a moment of truly gathering Carrie's ass and being like, you're a bad friend, grow the up, this is ridiculous, this is not my job. Carrie has them, Samantha has them, and even Charlotte gets her licks in, where she's like, grow up, Carrie, what the hell is this? Unfortunately on this show, because Carrie is the protagonist and also framed as bafflingly somehow a good person, everyone eventually walks it back, and Charlotte does indeed end up pawning her engagement ring so that Carrie can have a down payment. Now, every part of this is rightfully pointed out as one of the financial low points of the show. Famously, there's the whole conversation between Miranda and Carrie where she realizes that she has spent $40,000 on shoes and has nowhere to live. She has no retirement savings. She has only a few $100s in checking. Michael Patrick King, what is going on? But on that note, number 6, and I have to call out Samantha and Miranda here, who throughout the show were actually quite financially savvy and made a lot of excellent financial decisions. And in fact, Miranda even gave Carrie a pretty stern talking to about the state of her finances in that shoe store. But I have to say their flabbergasting money moment came shortly thereafter when they both volunteered unprompted to pay for this woman's down payment. Now here's the thing. Aside from the fact that Carrie obviously has a shopping addiction, has ludicrously bad money management skills for a 35-year-old, and has clearly been relying on men her entire life to provide some sort of financial exit plan, Samantha and Miranda, who otherwise seem to be quite financially savvy, are ready to just throw money at her to solve the problem. Now, no one probably wants to hear this, but Carrie, sounds like it's time for someone to move to New Jersey, or at least one of the less expensive boroughs. But why are we throwing money at this woman who has absolutely no financial management skills of her own to stay in an apartment that is likely way beyond her means? The craziest part about this scene too, to take it back to the Charlotte thing, is that it's sort of framed as Charlotte being a bad person because she's not also volunteering to write a check. Miranda, of all people, should have known better. Famously, we have a whole chapter in the first TFD book about how smart she was with money. But this entire story arc was just a mess. Now, taking it back to the men of Sex and the City and some of their financial absurdities, we have one of, I think, my actual least favorite men who's ever appeared on the show, Jack Berger, and his whole saga over the Prada shirt.
Oh! But you will wear forever. Yeah, I'd have to.
Now, basically at this point, Berger is a flailing male novelist, is there any other kind, who is incredibly threatened and insecure at the fact that Carrie, for the first time in her life, is in a position of financial power. Her column's doing well, she's getting $4 a word at Vogue, and most relevantly, her book is a success. Now, Berger, a character who did exist before the era of Twitter, but I absolutely know would have been tweeting up a storm if he had existed at that time, simply can't take this. Much like Steve, the idea of a woman being in a position of financial power over him, being more successful or having more accolades, and worst of all, buying him things, taps into a deep and potent strain of male insecurity. So when Carrie buys him a designer shirt, fun fact, the guy who plays the salesman at the store she buys the shirt from is also a minor character in Emily in Paris and a man I recently saw at a restaurant in New York. He's also extremely handsome in person, all these years later. Shout out to that actor. Point being, Berger cannot help but punish Carrie because of his own insecurities, and of course ends up leaving her in the most iconic, cowardly way possible. But not before reminding us all how particularly insidious that specific genre of man is. For number 8, we have to just briefly stop by Samantha here, because although that woman made almost exclusively iconic decisions financially, famously had the good sense to move from the Upper East Side to the meatpacking district just before it exploded in price, she did occasionally do some very stupid things. And one of them that I feel like the show could have explored further was her getting insider trading tips from a stockbroker. Not for nothing, but that's literally what sent Martha Stewart to prison. And the guy giving her the tips did get arrested, but I feel like she should have also gone to prison in this scenario. And at minimum, it was an incredibly risky thing to do, although it did fit in nicely with her pattern of using the men she slept with as conduits to illegal activities, such as when she was getting off-label Viagra from that one doctor. Point being, on the very few occasions, like also with the Hermes bag,
Well, there was a 5-year waiting list. Blah, blah, blah. I used your name.
that Samantha fumbles a little bit financially, it is because she's getting a little too much dip on her chip. And she was certainly doing that while using insider trading info to buy stocks. And she even wrote it down in the episode. I'm like, at least destroy the evidence. I don't know, if it could happen to Martha Stewart, it could happen to any of us. And surprise, surprise, for number 9, we are back to Carrie, who purchased a $3,800 chair because she had a crush on Aiden.
This is a beautiful chair.
This is my favorite piece in the shop.
I'll take it.
Now, first of all, having a crush on a man in a denim shirt, turquoise jewelry, and long shaggy hair, unrelatable. Although she did do the smart thing and lie about being a decorator, so she got a discount. But still, I mean, listen, have we all done stupid things when we're down bad for a questionable man? Of course we have. But this is the woman who literally doesn't even have $1,000 in her checking account. Where was this money even coming from? They sprinkle references to Carrie's credit card debt throughout the show, and it's kind of treated as a joke. But it's in moments like this that you see how it really happens. And the fact that she was doing all this for a man she was completely incompatible with from the get-go, lest we forget she was also lying about being a smoker at the time, just goes to show how much of a male-identified female, as they like to say on TikTok, Carrie Bradshaw really was. Lastly, number 10 is Big cutting Carrie a check to buy her apartment when they were not even dating. Now listen, I'm usually of the opinion that Big was pretty clear and upfront with Carrie in all of his intentions. He was clearly low-key embarrassed of her. The kind of woman he wanted to be with seriously or even just be seen with in public was basically the polar opposite of Carrie. And he never gave her what she wanted in terms of commitment or even words of affirmation. But where the people who insist that he was playing with her head do kind of have a point is in moments like this. If just writing a check for like 50 grand to your ex-situationship that you occasionally hook up with is not breadcrumbing her, then what is? And I know he's very wealthy and that money probably meant nothing to him, but it clearly meant something to Carrie. She even walked in there in that little sweater outfit that made her look like an extra in a production of Thoroughly Modern Millie. She clearly viewed him as some kind of a daddy figure. A zaddy, I'm sorry. And the fact that he wrote her that check, like, how could you not think that that would be giving her the wrong impression? And the worst part of all of that is she already humiliated herself by asking for the money in the first place, then she didn't even cash the check? Honey, at that point, sprinkle, sprinkle. But as we learn throughout the show, if Carrie's gonna do one thing, it's make horrendous financial decisions. Anyway, that's just the tip of the iceberg. As I said, we have a 4-part deep dive series all on the finances of the Sex and the City women, as well as their career and marriage moves. And it was a total blast to record and is just as fun to listen to, I assure you. So become a member, listen to the podcast, and I'll see you back on our regularly scheduled videos. Bye.